Japan experienced the deepest economic downturn in modern history during 1930 and 1932. The Japanese government believed that the only way to solve its economic and demographic problems was to expand into its neighbor's territory and take over its import market. Therefore, Japan declared war on China in 1937. The United States was particularly unhappy with Japan's increasingly aggressive attitude towards China. American officials responded to this aggression with many economic sanctions and trade embargoes. The US cut off all exports to Japan in the summer of 1941. Japan had relied on the United States for 80% of its oil, and without US oil supplies, its navy would be unable to function. The US reasoned that without access to money and goods, Japan would have to end their expansion. Instead, these sanctions just made Japan more determined to stand their ground. After months of negotiations between Tokyo and Washington D.C., neither side would budge. It seemed that war was inevitable. Admiral Yamamoto of the Imperial Japanese Navy concluded that for the Japanese to be victorious in the Pacific, they had to destroy the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is a U.S. naval base located near the center of the Pacific Ocean on the island of Oahu near Honolulu, Hawaii.
The Japanese planes took off just around 200 miles off the island of Oahu. 350 Japanese planes took off from the aircraft carriers and went to go rain havoc over the naval base. The Japanese plan was simple: destroy the Pacific Fleet. That way, the Americans would not be able to fight back as Japan's armed forces spread across the South Pacific. The Japanese would attack in three waves. The first wave was to attack military installations along the island of Oahu. The second wave would target specific areas, whilst the third wave would target fuel storage tanks. The attack happened on the 7th of December 1941 at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning in Oahu, Hawaii. The Japanese carriers went unnoticed because they had approached Pearl Harbor from the north of Oahu. In that area, no radar was able to detect them because of the mountains, so it was essentially a dead zone. That Sunday, there were no American surveillance planes circling the area. The first wave attacked along Oahu, specifically at Pearl Harbor. One of the Japanese air pilots dropped a 1,800-pound bomb on the USS Arizona ship. Sinking it with 1,100 men trapped inside. The USS Oklahoma then proceeded to be hit by over 10 torpedoes. 8 other battleships were then bombed, including the USS California and USS West Virginia. There was nearly 2,400 fatalities, including 1,000 injuries, as well as the loss of highly expensive warfare vehicles, such as 300 airplanes and 20 warfare vessels. In comparison, Japan suffered relatively light casualties. You can safely say that the Pearl Harbor naval base was ill-prepared for this unsuspected crushing attack. After the Pearl Harbor attack, and for the first time during years of discussion and debate, the American people were united in their determination to go to war. The Japanese had wanted to provoke the United States into an agreement to lift the economic sanctions against them. Instead, they had pushed their adversary into a global conflict that ultimately resulted in Japan's first occupation by a foreign power. On December 8th, Congress approved Roosevelt's declaration of war on Japan. 3 days later, Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, declared war against the United States. More than 2 years after the start of World War II, the United States had entered the conflict.